So the first thing that you're going to want to do for the girl's dress is to print out your pattern as specified in the instructions in the pattern. Make sure it's to scale, so the square that's in the pattern after you print it, that should measure 1 inch by 1 inch, and then you know everything's measuring correctly. The next thing that you're going to do is cut out the actual size that you want in that pattern. After you have that done, you're going to lay out everything. If you know you have more than enough fabric, you can just cut each piece as you want. Otherwise, you have limited amount of fabric. You're just going to want to make sure that everything's going to fit. So I have some leftover because I made a size 4 tee for my older daughter, and now I'm going to make a 2 tee for my 2-year-old. And I didn't know if I had enough fabric. It looks like I am. I'm going to be able to make it work because I have to tweak a few things, but it should be good. Follow the cutting instructions. Once you get comfortable at sewing, there's always tips and tricks that you can do to make a pattern work. If you really love a fabric and you just might not have enough, always feel free to ask me questions and comment on the tutorials, and I will answer them as I get a chance. So I'm very excited for this, and let's cut out this dress now. And if you don't mind, give me a quick follow, because the more of you that follow, the more likely I'll be able to get more of these complete, because I do have a day job and I'm a full-time mom as well. So if I can quit one of my other jobs, if I get enough followers, then that'd be sweet, and I can give more content to you guys and tutorials and patterns. Okay, going to sew the shoulder seams on both sides, right sides together. So we have this one and we have this one. I'm going to serge across the top. You can use a regular single needle sewing machine, or you can also use a serger for this step. So a lot of times, especially if I'm not lining a garment, I like to use a serger just because it clean finishes it, it stops it from fraying, but know that you can use either or. Okay, and then you're going to want to iron these flat. So now that I ironed it flat, I'm going to lay this way, and then the next step is going to be to put the sleeve on each side. So we're going to sew the sleeve. So you're going to lay the sleeve right sides together. You're also going to want to make sure that you have notched the sleeves, or you know where not together. So the underarm of the sleeve isn't going to have any gathers. And so the gathers are going to start approximately right here and go to this edge. So it's all on the sleeve cap. So that's the next step. So follow your notches for that. And then here, I'll show you how I pin it. So doing gathers is a little bit different with pinning. So some people will baste and then pull the basting, but because that still takes time and you have to shift it, my preference actually is to simply pin up until the notch. Okay, so I pinned here until the notch, and then that's sewn on 1 to 1. And then the rest of it, what I do is I just kind of fold it in half, make those 2 pins touch for where it's 1 to 1. So all the gathering of the sleeve is up here, and then I figure out like, okay, where's about halfway? And then I take those 2 spots and I match them together like that. So I'm distributing the gathers and fullness evenly without having to baste it. You could do it either way. I like this way because then it's really even. So I fold it in half, that section again, and then I pin it there. So yeah, I just keep doing in half on all the spots with the gathers until I feel like it's the appropriate amount of pinning. So much smaller than that pinning, I feel like it's overkill, but it needs about that many pins. Okay, now the other half. Do the same thing where I'm gonna pin it all. Okay, so that's what it looks like. And now I'm gonna do the other side, and then we're gonna sew it. Okay, so here we go. We have both sides pinned, and now I'm going to serge down here. And I'm going to make sure to remove the pins. So when you're serging, you have to remove the pins before you sew over them. If you're using a single needle, you can just top stitch over the pins if they're sewing pins. So now I'm going to iron this flat. And your friendly reminder, don't skip ironing. The next thing we're going to do is to sew together the side seams, the little side seam here, and the undersleeve. Both side seams and the undersleeve on both sides. You can pin if you want. I don't, because it's such small pieces, because we're working on kids and I don't need to, so to save time. Otherwise, pin it as much as you need, but that's where we're going to end up sewing. And again, we can iron this flat. Now for the hem here, this is just going to be a rolled edge hem, so it's about 1/4 of an inch or 0.6 centimeters, just like this, a really clean finish, really small petite, and then top stitch down there. You can iron it up first, the full length, and then fold it under. Otherwise, if you're a little more advanced, you can fold it while sewing, which is my preference. So now we are going to finish the sleeve hem and elastic. So I'm cutting 2 pieces of elastic, 1 for each sleeve, to this length. This next part is you're going to want to do a 3-step zigzag stitch. If you can't do that, you can use a single needle top stitch and just kind of sew zigzags. That would be a little bit harder to do, but the goal is to just create a little tunnel. Okay, so that gave us a little circle right here. And so we want 1 more. Okay, so we got 2 now, 1 for each sleeve. For the next step, it's going to be easiest if you take off the back of your sewing machine. So if you're able to do it where you can loop it under. So what I'm going to do is I put this on the inside. So it's on the inside of the sleeve. And I'm going to bring my sleeve up here. Okay, in the under sleeve, I start with, there's a spot for the elastic on the actual pattern of where to put it, but you can move it up or down depending on how big that of a ruffle you want. So this is not a mandatory placement for the ruffle, but I've been doing mine at 25 millimeters up from the bottom hem when it's finished. And I feel like that's been working out pretty good. But I've been lining mine up with 25. You can do more, you can do less, depending on what you want. There is a recommendation on the actual pattern, so you can follow that as well. Then you're going to want to switch to a lightning stitch, which is just a little jig and a jag. If you're using elastic or something like that, this is how you would top stitch elastic. So I'm going to keep my elastic lined up with the center, the red line, the center of my needle, and I'm going to keep the edge lined up with the 25 millimeter placement on the stitch plate. Once you get it started, you can kind of pull it on. You don't want to do too tight, so I'm not going to stretch the elastic to capacity, but I do want to stretch it to sew on to create the ruffle. And then when I get closer, I just want to make sure, I want to do a quick test to make sure that I'm like not overstretching, but I'm getting it stretched on. Do a gut test, because once you get, like, if you're stretching both to the fullest, right, that's about how thin it is going to be. Okay, and then we're going to repeat this on the other side. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to do clean finish the front hem. I'm doing this separate from the skirt just because when you go to put the gathers around the waistband on the skirt, it's a little bit easier to do it that way. So we're going to do this first and then we'll move on to the next step. So I measure up to where this fold is, and then I'm going to fold it back and make sure that that's my seam allowance. So it's about right there. So I look at it, yep, that looks about good. And then we are just going to tuck back about 1/4 of an inch and then fold over, and we're going to top stitch down here. And that is our center front. And on the other side, I'll do the same exact thing. There we go. And now it's time to top stitch that. The next step here is to grab your large string for the ruffle, and we are going to do a very small fold over rolled edge hem. There you go. And we're going to edge stitch it all the way down to create a rolled edge hem on one side of the ruffle. So my ruffle piece is done. I just did this across the entire thing. I'm going to iron it flat, and then we're going to pin the ruffle onto the collar. we have 2 collar pieces. Take one, set it aside, and then lay the other one flat on the table like this. We are going to use the same method that we used on the shoulder cap to do this, but because it's such a long piece, I'm gonna take this, fold it exactly in half, and I'm gonna poke a little pin right there. I'm also gonna do that on my ruffle here, fold it in half. On the outside edge, the largest part of the collar, fold it back open here, and then with the rolled edge seam allowance facing up, that way we're right sides together, I'm going to place the raw edge of it with the raw edge of the outside collar, and I'm going to pin right down the middle. So now I know that I have half my ruffle to this side, half my ruffle to the other side, and then the next step is to pin both ends to the point, and then that's where the ruffle stops. Once I have this finished, it's the same method. We are going to fold it in half each portion and pin it in the half until we get a really even pinned out ruffle. You can just baste and pull it. That's an option too. Whatever your preference is, it's really up to you. So here we go. I'm going to feed this up so you don't have to watch this that long, but then you'll do it yourself. Okay, so once you have that pinned, the next thing that you want to do is take the other piece and place it right sides together with the other collar on top and just pin it in a few spots. All right, so I have it pinned together and I'm going to go and sew it. Okay, so now we have it all sewn like this around the edge. So we're gonna flip it inside out and iron it, and that's our ruffled collar. So the next step is with the right sides facing out of the top piece, I'm gonna place this here and pin it around the neck. Okay, and now that that is pinned, the next thing that we want is we're gonna take our neck bias tape, we're gonna fold it under a little bit like that right here, and then we're going to make sure it's lined up with the center front edge like this, and I'm gonna pin it there. And then we are going to top stitch this around the entire neckline, and once we get to this end, this piece is a little bit stretchy, so whatever is left over when we get to this end, say there's that much, we're going to fold it over and sew it, and that's going to create a clean finish. And then I'll show you the next step. So let's go sew this on, and then we can fold it under for the clean finish. All right, so we have quite a bit left, so I'm gonna cut off even more just so we don't have as much. We're lining it up like this. Now that that is done, what's going to happen is we are going to pull the collar up from the main body so it's flat like that, and then we are going to fold this under once and then fold it over twice. Okay, so we're going to fold that up and fold this under like that and then fold it over. And there is our clean binding. We're going to edge stitch that in place. That way we're covering up this entire seam. So just go little bit by bit, fold it, and then fold it over. Now our neck binding is clean finished. And of course, we need to iron. I do sometimes like to use this thing called a ham. It's a nice way to lift it up off the table, and then we can just iron it flat. So there we go, that is our top, and now we just have to do the bottom, which will go pretty quick. Now I'm going to take our center back skirt and our center front skirt, and I'm going to line them up at the side seams here and then serge down each edge. You can also top stitch, but I recommend serging. We want to do the rolled edge hem at the bottom. So for this, I have been doing about a 2 centimeter rolled edge hem. So I fold it up 2 centimeters. You can iron it and then fold it under, or you can just eyeball it, which is what I'm gonna do. But I do recommend ironing it up 2 centimeters and then folding it under the one to create the 1 inch rolled edge hem on the bottom. The next step is we want to match the same fold over that we did on the top here, this hem. So we're going to fold it up about right there. And then the same that we did on the top, we fold this under about 1/4 of an inch to create the clean finish. Do that to the other side as well. Now we are going to attach the skirt to the top. Where this facing is, that's 1-to-1, and after that, that's where all the gathers are gonna go in. So you just pin it here, and then the side seam goes to the side seam here and pin. And then you're gonna distribute the fullness the same that we did. This side seam goes to this side seam here, and the center front facing again goes to the center front facing, so you pin here and then all the fullness goes there. There's no fullness in this facing, it's just 1-to-1 there. So I'm just gonna go ahead and do this, and then I'll show you what it looks like after it's gathered, because we've already been through this, so it's kind of repeating. Okay, here we go. We are gonna sew this on with a serger. So I'm gonna be very careful not to cut anything underneath, and I gotta pull pins out as I go, otherwise I'll chop them. All right, so we got that done. Now, what I like to do, I like to pull this thread back, then slide it up, so we hide that thread, and then top stitch it. I like to tack it down so we hide that loose end without having to tie it off, and we'll repeat that over here. Now we're at the place where we are going to add the buttonholes and the buttons. So I like to do the buttonholes first, and then just so my buttons line up super well, I just reference the buttonhole to place the buttons on. Here's my quick trick of how I do it without doing too much marking or anything like that. I hold this up to the inside, so line the edge up with that edge and that edge, and then I go down the middle of that, and I put a pin where the center button is on that, and I do the same thing here. I'm going to line that up, add pins. Now that I have my 6 buttonholes marked, depending on how you do your buttonholes, you can mark it differently if you like to mark where the center is. I always like to do a practice buttonhole, just because if you do them by hand, you're going to want to make sure that this pin is the center point of the buttonhole. If you do it by machine, do a test run and then measure like from where it starts, where the center is. So you'll have to kind of do the math on your own on that one, but these will mark the center of the buttonholes, and then you can mark and finish them however you want. So we finished all the buttonholes, and I just have to trim the threads, and then I usually will take a seam ripper to finish this. Okay, so I'm going to show you one, and then you guys can finish the rest. What I like to do, line up my other top like this, center the facing, and then to figure out my buttonhole placement, I just poke through the center of the buttonhole, and voila, that's where my first button goes. Voila, you finished your cute little dress. So it's a fun little outfit.